Hello, everyone, and welcome to a new episode of ClueCon Weekly. I am your host, Jon Gray, and today I am honored to introduce Laura Blersch, who is a cognitive inclusion advocate. And today we're going to be talking about unlocking neurodiversity and some strategies for strengthening the team dynamics. So, Laura, thank you so much for joining us. You want to introduce yourself to our audience?
Thank you for having me. So, I am a late diagnosed neurodivergent. I have combined ADHD. I was diagnosed at 38 after I already
Wow.
made it through college and grad school. So, was pretty established in a career at that point as well. I chose to become um, diagnosed because, or go through the diagnosis process because
Mm-hmm.
I learned a lot through my teaching that I do at a local university and kept saying, "Hey, I think I have this," the more I learned about it.
Yeah.
And really just wanted that, confirmation that, for lack of a better word, a label to go, "Oh, yeah, this is not normal for everyone."
Mm-hmm. No, that's really interesting to be diagnosed that late. You kind of live your whole life with the truth, and then all of a sudden the ball is dropped on you, and you're like, okay, well that makes a lot of sense now. Um, but that kind of rolls into my first question of like, what sparked your curiosity for advocating for this? I guess that you yourself being someone who's been personally affected, and you've kind of seen this in your own work. Why start this journey, and how did that all begin?
So that is exactly what it is. I was diagnosed and said, this is something I see that I experience on a daily basis that within the workplace, that is different things are a struggle. And it's because of my ADHD. And if we all want to be the best version of ourselves, we
Mm-hmm.
want to be our best coworkers, and we really do want to treat people, for the most part, how they need to be treated. But if they don't know and that awareness is not there, they can't do that. So
Mm-hmm.
that's why I started doing it. And it has really uh, been sort of that passion project for me because I want to make it better for those that are further down the line. I also want to reduce that stigma that people have of ADHD, autism. My demographic, that 35 to 45 female, is actually the highest increasing rate of diagnosis for ADHD or autism because we grew up in the 90s. And well, uh, that is something that females didn't have. We followed directions, we were quiet, we didn't, we were rule followers for the most part, very much generalization here, but it didn't, you know, jump off the paper the way maybe some boys did. So, and back then, girls didn't have autism. So, what we know now versus what we knew then,
Yeah.
now all these people are finding out through awareness. And a lot of it is because their kids are being diagnosed. They have kids, they are now going through school and they're experiencing diagnosis, and they're like, well, I didn't know that that was weird. I do that. And now they're seeking those pieces.
Mm-hmm. No, I think that's super funny. You mentioned that back then, women didn't have autism or, neurodiversity, or it wasn't something to be diagnosed with that because, that would be that's too boyish of a thing to have. Or, it's not even thought or considered of. But I like how you kind of mentioned that everyone's, a hero in their own story. We all want to be the best version of ourselves and, being able to contribute to a team. And a lot of the times we just don't know the things that we could be doing better or the things that we're doing poorly. So on kind of superpowers, how is it that you are able to unleash, your own superpower? Or can you walk us through like what a superpower would kind of look like in a diverse team and how that plays out?
So for me personally, I'm a process person. And one of the things that I do really well, and that's a result of the way my brain is wired, is finding the best way to do something. So I used to think it was because I was lazy. It turns out it's not. It's just how my brain's wired. is that I can look at a process and find, if it is clunky, find the most efficient way to do something. And particularly, especially if it's something that I'm doing on a daily basis, because I don't want to do it more than once. I want to make it the easiest possible, because I'm fighting against my own brain a lot of the time with executive function. That's a struggle with ADHD.
Hmm.
And so for me, that's what helps me. I also am able to read rooms pretty well, and understand, see those underlying currents that are happening. And one of the there's a book called The Canary Code, and that is it talks about how neurodivergent people are the first ones to experience issues within an organizations, because it's that canary in the coal mine theory. They're striving for the oxygen.
Hmm.
So, when something's sort of going wrong in an organization, like my spidey senses go up, and it's like trying to figure out what's going on, for better or worse. Um, but for me, those are those things. That's my superpower. For
Hmm.
others, it might be figuring out, you know, some, like, I have worked with dyslexics. He was a coder. Loved working with him. He could find like the most ridiculous errors in something, because he learned all these different tricks from being dyslexic.
Yeah,
Uh,
dyslexia in coding sounds like a nightmare. You go back through your code and you read it as an S and it's actually a 5, and you're racking your brain around it. That sounds very frustrating. I wouldn't say funny.
when
That
we
sounds
were
frustrating.
when we were troubleshooting something, he figured that one thing out, and it was one little tiny thing. And of course, we all know with code that is something else.
Hmm.
People, sometimes it's spatial awareness or creativity that they bring to that team. I look at things non-linearly. So I'm not in a straight line. I may be over here and you may think it's not related at all, but there is a reason my brain is telling me to go that way.
Hmm.
And you know, I've been told on a couple occasions I'm going out of scope because I'm asking a question over here. And for a neurotypical person, there is not the linear path that they were
Yeah.
expecting based on that question. It made sense for my brain at the time. So I think one of those things that I'm really trying to touch on here is, to sum things up, is to just, even somebody's asking something that doesn't make sense, or they're approaching something in a different way, doesn't make it wrong. They may just need to go there to check that in their brain to move over here.
Hmm. No, and I think that is a really good point on just like how it is that we are able to convey that, what, as neurodiverse people, in order to convey that to our neurotypical colleagues or coworkers. Wondering what strategies or any tools you are able to implement, or that you've seen people implement. I know with the revolution of like AI and all these other tools that are coming out, my workplace has definitely revolutionized, and I'm just curious what you and the community kind of see as some tips or some helpful ways in order to be able to be a better communicator, and in order to put what's going on in your brain into an effective team.
So for me, as throughout my entire career, well before knowing I was diagnosed, I wrote emails that were always straight and to the point. They did not have, the niceties of it. It was just straight and to the point. And I have
Hmm.
gotten in trouble throughout my career, about that. So one of my bosses, we're talking like 15 years ago at this point, was like, just say, "Hey, how are you?" Well, now I've moved on to, thanks for checking in, or thanks for following up, or I'll
Hmm.
add just one line, depending on whatever it is, to, add that piece in, because it goes against every fiber of my being to put that in there, because to me, it's not efficient. It's not
Yeah.
necessarily needed. I hate having to read the niceties and find what I need to do from an email.
Uh-huh.
So, but with that, ChatGPT in itself, if you're trying to write something and someone that's gotten in trouble for being too direct, that ChatGPT can help you, like, I need to say this. Can you do it in a different, a nice tone or a welcoming tone, this or that? And that sort of helps you at least as a starting point to say, yeah, okay, this works. Or,
Hmm.
all right, let me try this one again because that was not a good
Yeah.
prompt.
No,
And
I think
then,
yeah, that's totally
go
where
ahead.
we differ. I realize that when I'm writing emails and I'm like, "Hey, how was your weekend? I'm so glad that you traveled safely." And I'm like writing all these niceties, and then I look at my peers and I'm like, "Oh, you wrote like two sentences right there." Now I look like I'm totally wasted everyone's time and kissing babies over here when I'm trying to do that.
You know what? You get used to it as, you know, um, an individual. And really, I worked on this one team with two older ladies well, actually three older ladies. They were towards the end of their careers. They were in their 60s. We got to know each other very, very, very well. I could write them emails without that stuff, and they knew that that was not my personality. They just
Hmm.
knew I was busy and I was straight to the point, and I was trying to make it as easy as possible. Um, so we developed that relationship where we didn't take we took assumptions out and just went with uh, you know, as straightforward as possible.
Yeah,
And they
what's
learned to
there?
do that with me.
Hmm.
Um, and then
Yeah.
another tool.
I love our back and forth here. No, please go on. Another tool. What else
Another
were you gonna mention?
tool I really like is Crisp AI. It is something that you can use like in your background. It runs through your sound and your mic, all run through that before it goes
Hmm.
into like whatever your digital meeting is, because there's a lot of times, particularly if there's a lot of people in a meeting, I'm talking more than like two or three. There's a lot, the amount of concentration that it takes to follow what is being said. If I'm tired, if I'm stressed, I have a auditory processing delay, meaning someone will say something to me and I heard words. It sounded like someone was speaking another language.
Hmm.
So I miss maybe three-quarters of what they said, but that Crisp AI does like closed captioning for me in the background,
Yeah,
and it can also do notes for you at the end of the meeting. It can figure out like what you've committed to and give you action steps. But ultimately, it gives me like if I miss something, I can go back to the transcript. And I find that to be really helpful because it's a big scary thing to be like, hey, I missed that.
yeah,
Often the assumption is we weren't paying attention, and that is in fact not the case. It's just that went in one ear and out the other and did not do anything in between.
exactly. No, and I can definitely interpret it as hey, I wasn't listening to what you were saying, and I don't care, but can you repeat it again? And that can be intimidating to go up and have to actually admit that, but you're just trying to be genuine and honest, and like we were saying, just being a good team player. And those are both really good tools, both just writing and being able to change the tone with GPT, but also, as you were mentioning, Crisp AI with being able to take notes or closed captioning. I'm wondering how the paradigm or shift of working remotely and kind of people who work from home or outside of offices has kind of influenced you. Which do you kind of prefer? Do you prefer to be in office or do you prefer working from home? And how has that landscape kind of changed throughout the years?
So I love working remotely. One, I can control. So, one thing with neurodivergent individuals, we are really sensitive to our environments. So, our sensory input is often very heightened. So, I can control my lights, I can control the sound, I can control what I am wearing. There are maybe one particular shirt works one day and not the other because of sensory issues, you can control all of that. You're not commuting in itself can heighten someone's level of stress, which increases their sensory input, and
Hmm.
remotely is no no commute. So
Yeah.
there's so much more control I have over my own environment that it actually makes it a lot easier. And I will tell you, I'm an extrovert. So but I struggle with the sensory input. So just
Hmm.
being able to control that makes a huge difference.
No, that makes a lot of sense, and something that I did not even think about. Something as small as what shirt you're wearing can throw you off or make you the best version of yourself, huh?
Yeah, I mean, noise canceling headphones, they're great. But I just, flew at the beginning part of the month and I have, the over the ear noise canceling headphones. I only wear them on the plane. They end up feeling so heavy on my head and they actually hurt around my ears that I can't wear them for that long. There's days I have open ear headphones. Most days I can wear these. These are the most comfortable thing for me. There's other days like I can't and I just have to have the sound coming in
Hmm.
without headphones. It's amazing what those little things do because it actually um, heightens and reduces your ability to like do your work.
Yeah.
Focus.
Yeah, and it's kind of speaking of your surroundings, and the way that they can affect you. We talked about ways that we can make ourselves better, but on the flip side, something that really affects everybody is just general burnout. I'm curious how neurodiverse people, what signs we are able to see when burnout is kind of happening, and if you really think that there's like maybe any differences or things that we can even be more keen on looking for people who aren't so typical.
So burnout in itself affects neurodivergent people at a higher rate. Right now, they estimate 43% of neurodivergent employees are burned out, with another 20% at high risk of burnout that are still working. But what it does, it reduces their skill level. Their sensory input goes higher, so it puts your um, nervous system into fight or flight. So now you're constantly in fight or flight and you're still trying to maintain your regular work.
Hmm.
I personally, I will struggle with executive functioning, and that could be transitioning from one thing to the next. It could be as simple as you get home from the grocery store and you are having trouble getting out of the car to get into the house. That is an executive function. That can be a struggle. When I am burned out, I personally experienced burnout for about 2 years, had no idea that I was in this perpetual state until
Hmm.
uh, I sort of started leaving it. And the one huge input for that was gone. So I started realizing, oh, I can actually start wearing this shirt again, or like I can wear these shoes and my feet don't feel like they're being squeezed. And I don't have all of this tension in my neck. I don't have headaches constantly. There's these little pieces, and it took me, like, it got worse before it got better. I'll tell you that.
Hmm.
And it was the executive function. Like, there might have been one day, like, one thing I could do a day for like a solid 2 weeks. When it got really bad, I could do one thing a day that required like adulting, as people like to call
Hmm.
it.
Yeah, exactly.
And then that was it. That was all I could do. And because I knew that that's what it was, I didn't beat myself up about it. But if I didn't know what that was, logically, as Americans, we beat ourselves up about that type of thing.
Yep.
So then it actually gets worse.
Yeah, the hyperactivity culture is ridiculous, and it definitely perpetuates. It's a slippery slope because once you can't do something, and then you feel it boils up, and then next thing you know, you're way down here, as you were kind of saying. It gets a lot worse before it gets better.
It does. It does. Like, and one thing that like helps with that is if you have the ability to give your employees flexibility in their schedules, you know, the allow them to unmask if they're neurodivergent. And masking is that really suppressing, like you see my hands are moving. I
Hmm.
have I have like I'm moving.
Yeah,
And that is what I need for my brain to work. But in certain environments, I will very much suppress that, and I will sit here in a very quiet body, um, physically here, but not my brain is doing so many things that I can't focus on what is actually happening. Um, and that actually leads to burnout in a lot of cases.
oh
So
yeah,
being able to that authentic self, not always having to not filter what you're saying. That is not the best way because we are all professionals. And there are times that
exactly.
we need to filter what we're saying, but not having to say, oh, I need to do it this way because it's this person, and other ways they're going to think this or that. And being allowed to say, I missed that, and not have it the assumption that you're not paying attention,
Hmm.
or that, I'm reaching down on the ground because I dropped this, and it's not because I'm not paying attention, it's because I need that to continue to function. So it's that flexibility, that reducing sensory input and overload can really help people come out of burnout or avoid it.
Hmm.
And really, that's the same for neurotypical people too, because anything that we do for neurodivergence, neurotypical people will um, appreciate as well. So, and
Yeah.
benefit from as well, right? Like neurotypical, but like a mom or a dad, and they have kids, a flexible schedule is going to play a role. Working from home is going to be helpful, but it's also going to be even more so for that neurodivergent individual.
No, I think those are awesome. The metaphor, just term of masking and unmasking, is one I'd never heard of, but I think it lays it out perfectly. Where we need to move into a direction of allowing people to work in their best state. Because when we feel good, when we have a clear head, that's when we definitely get our best work done. And I know you listed out a couple of different ways, but I'm just curious what steps or how we move from kind of like awareness to action, both from maybe like a managerial perspective on the employees, or if you just have any last tips or advice for people who maybe identify with your story and how they can get themselves out of this situation of burnout, or maybe they feel as though they're just trapped into their own confined cubicle and they need to work in this specific way. How is it that people kind of speak up, or that they can make a little bit of action in order to get out of that situation?
So one of the big things for managers is creating that safe space, that place where that individual can come bring these concerns forward. Accommodations are there to level the playing field. They're not to make things easier. It's really just to level the playing field and
Hmm.
to not make them so rigid that doctor's notes are required, that, they have to jump through hoops. Like, make it easy, because those jumping through hoops, they're not going to do it. Like, for me, like that requires executive function. Um, so it's one of those things where the easier you make the creating those accommodations or asking for things, the more likely people are going to do it and
Hmm.
come forward with those and be in the unmasked state so that they can move forward. Like, I had a coworker who also had ADHD, and I said to him, I was like, "Hey," we were talking about motivation and struggling. Um, and I was like, "Hey, you want a body double sometime? Just let me know." And that's where you both are jumping on line, you may be doing entirely different things, but it feels like somebody's there with you and
Exactly.
you gets you through it. So having those people that you can like rely on and or being that person that someone can rely on is super helpful.
No, I like that a lot. And I can talk to you about different tips and tricks and how much different we can make the workplace, with inclusion by neurodiversity. But Laura, is there anything else that I have yet to ask you or that you wanted to bring up today?
I would say just know, like overwhelmingly know that neurodivergent communication is going to be different than neurotypical communication and try not to make assumptions. Try and have those difficult conversations and try and really see each other at your coworkers and your teammates as people so that
Mm,
you can start that process of creating that safer space that helps everyone.
I like that a lot. Unleashing the superpowers within all of us. Laura, I appreciate your dedication, your work, and what you are doing for the community. Thanks so much for joining us today.
Thank you.